Hello and welcome to Movies, Films, and Flicks. I am Mark Hoffmeyer, and joining me is a man who hopefully won't get possessed by darkness during this episode. It's my good friend
Oh,
Kai.
I don't know. I'm fighting it all. It's so hard to fight in the darkness, but
And if I mean, please turn into a whale during this
uh,
episode because that
uh,
would be
I,
a very interesting story.
I defeated the darkness for now, so I can't make any promises. But we'll
Good.
see what happens. Well, you never know. You
Did that
never know.
bracelet I made for you do the trick?
Yeah. Yes, it did. It did so much so that I sleep with it. I bathe with it. I dream with it. I think of it all the time.
Good. Well, listen, as long as you're not turning into giant kaijus possessed by darkness and wiping out towns, it's a good
Only
bracelet.
in my dreams, Mark. Only in my dreams. I try not. I like to live that life of the righteous way. So no destroying towns. And thank you for having me once again. I love doing this with you.
It's great you're back, and you've been wanting to kind of talk about anime on the show for a long time, and you pitched The Boy and the Beast, and I gotta say, like, so you know, I'm I've watched the Ghibli movies. I got assigned once to watch every episode of Dragon Ball Z, Super, and GT and pull all of Vegeta's stats. So I spent several weeks not sleeping, getting up at like 4 a.m., going to bed at midnight, just pouring all of Vegeta's stats. And now I feel like he's a family member of mine.
Yeah,
Like
yeah. He does get to that point where you start to love Vegeta a lot.
if I had to do Goku, I probably would have been depressed. But watching Vegeta evolve and be like, not my ball on his pink
Yeah,
shirt
he
and
has the greatest. I mean,
yeah,
now there's a lot to be said about Dragon Ball Z. There's a lot of Dragon Ball Z haters out there, but let's be real. Vegeta has had the best arc of
oh,
all the Dragon Ball Z characters.
by far. And I so
By
I
far the best character development in the mangas, in the anime, hands down, Vegeta.
and that was probably like 2 years ago. So I had I had no idea about Mamoru Hosoda, and I had no idea about his movies. I didn't know about Belle. I didn't know about Wolf Children. I didn't know about The Boy and the Beast. I didn't know that The Boy and the Beast made $50 million when it was
Yeah.
released. Like this was a gigantic hit around the world. And so,
And
like,
that's yeah. I mean, honestly, not to cut you off, I'm sorry,
no,
but
yeah,
I'm so
cut me off.
excited about talking about this with you. But that's why I recommended it to you because when people ask about anime, they generally jump to the shonen, the blood, the guts, and the gore. And I felt like this is such a good entry point for people um, who aren't that familiar with anime to get a little bit of all of it. You get a little bit of the action, you get a little bit of the drama and the heart, and I just think it's a great starting point for people to really see what anime is about.
It's a great point too, because you get the action, but you also get the abstract storytelling. You get you get the like it's the way the story is told. Like I love the idea of family. Like I love the three different fathers in this. Like I love the thing about the darkness, and I love how abstract it is too. I going through a lot of reviews for this movie, a lot of people are like, yeah, it's I like the first half, then for some reason it jumps into the second half and they don't like that. And then there's people who are like, oh, everything's too vague. But I was reading a lot of Hosoda's interviews, and he talks about being abstract. He likes the abstraction. He likes
Yes.
to, you know, he was fired off of what Howl's Moving Castle, or replaced on that, and then he went on this really good run of films. And but like during that time, his mom died. He had kids, and like a lot of his films are based on these feelings he has. So for me, I'm not too deep into my experience with his films, but they seem to be more about the feelings. And I think if you don't like some of the pacing or plotting or jumping around, I think that's more of the like abstraction of his films. Which,
Yeah.
and I guess one thing to bring by you, like if you go make like a pretty abstract film, like I love The Boy and the Heron that recently came out, but some people, I don't know why, but they were like, oh, I hate it, it's terrible, it makes no sense. But you have like the stoic lead character, you have the Miyazaki's storytelling, like through like he talks about storytelling through abstraction, and like you just got to think about these movies. And The Boy and the Beast, you got to go like take a walk and think about this
Yeah.
movie. Like they don't
Yeah.
hand you everything on a plate, like they hand it to you in a raw egg in a bowl, and you just got to like deal with
That
it.
is a big point to anime. Most anime is very much they like they want to lead you to the water, but they're not making you drink it the way I guess you think you should drink it with that
Yeah,
abstract, ideal. And it's very open to the kind of viewer. What are you taking from this that you're watching? And it does make sense. And people, I feel a lot of the times when people say it doesn't make sense to them, it's just they're not really opening themselves up to see what is really trying to be said through the visuals and through the movie and through the script and through the writing and through just the emotions that the movie is giving off, essentially. So it's a big part of, man, there's so many anime. Death Note is like one of the most weirdly abstract, layer on level kind of anime where there's all these twists and turns, and the bad guy is kind of like the good guy, but he's not the good guy. And there's this weird moral, decision you have to make as a viewer. Like, okay, there's this guy who's killing people who are horrible people with this death note, but he's a teenager and he shouldn't be killing people.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
It's one of those weird conundrums, right? So I think that's what anime does. It pushes that boundary that most Western animations don't really push in terms of making you think and really testing the boundaries of what your moral are through visual medium.
Absolutely. And but like you said, you got to think, you got to go, would I do that? Would I write that note? Like would
Yeah.
I like how would I react? And you know what I love about The Boy and the Beast? Like I wish I watched this when I was younger because I hope I don't bring this up on the show a lot, but I'm 41 and like the era we grew up in, like emotions weren't really tackled in a lot of cinema or animated films. There wasn't like a lot of ways to like process anger healthily
Yeah.
via a good cinematic example. And like it was kind of weird growing up. Like I was listening to that song Saint Anger by Metallica, and they're like, I want my anger to be healthy. Like I want my anger for me, not just like an explosive, destructive force. And then I started
Yeah.
thinking about the Boy and the Beast and the relationships between the characters and the two humans who are kind of polar opposites of themselves. What Ren and I could do it, Ichiro Hiko, like
Yeah.
like one of them can kind of, Ren, he he had the mentor, right? He had Kamatetsu, and they yelled at each other and they expressed their anger, and they never really talked to each other, but they also bonded over just being angry and sullen and loners, and they were able to express their anger. But then what Ichiro Hiko, he's a human who got transported into this beast land, but was always told that he was a beast, even though that he knew that nothing that wasn't right. So then there was just this bottled up anger, even though Yozen, his parent, was a fine parent. The kid just bottled his anger and bottled it and bottled it, and it came out really destructively. Much more so over Ren, who expressed his anger. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was one of the kind of the main highlights of the story, right? Is
Mm-hmm.
this juxtaposition of these two main characters who both get swept into this fantastical, land of anthropomorphic animal people, right?
Yeah.
Whereas the one kid who, the main character, right? Cuda, he's just this orphan, right? Who ends up in this place. So he never had anybody. He never had anyone to teach him how to be a communicator, how to love, how to grow up, essentially, right? He's on his own.
Mm-hmm.
Ren, on the other hand, is in the monster world. He's grown up with these people or not these people, but these monsters, essentially, these animals who have taken him in and trained him and taught him the way. But like you said, he still has this darkness about him because he notices that he's different
Mm-hmm.
from everybody else, and everybody is just gaslighting. No, you're the same. You're just like us, man. What are you talking about? You're tripping. But he knows, and that creates that darkness. Whereas the darkness Kyuta has is inherent, because he has nobody, and the things that he's been through have created this darkness in him not to trust people. And this is what makes me love this freaking movie, man.
And
And then when he meets Kumatetsu, Kumatetsu is essentially him, just the flip side, right? This loner beast god, or potential beast god, who has all the weight of the world on his shoulders that he doesn't really want, and he's
mhm.
not really feeling that, and he's like, he's resentful of it. He's resentful of the fact that he knows that there's this expectation of him to be this thing that he doesn't really want to be. So such a
You,
great
you you've
start.
talked
That's a
about
great.
you've talked about crying while watching this movie. Like, what gets you? Like, there's certain movies that really get me, that just floor me. Like, what about this movie makes you well up?
I think the themes that it hits on, there's several main kind of themes that this movie really hits. The main one, like you spoke of earlier, the three fathers, right? The unconventional family that Kyuta finds himself in once he gets to this new land and this new world, right? He meets these three guys who don't know what to do with him, right? They find this weird human kid, and then he
Angry
just
human kills a
angry,
little
angry as
maniac.
hell human kid. And through all of it, they accept him in, and they learn to love him as one of their own, right? And I think anybody can relate with that, that feeling of being accepted outside of your own family. Just that theme of like the finding family outside of your actual family, and that having that unconventional family of the kooky, crazy, uncles or brothers,
Yeah.
or fathers or whoever, comes into your life. And in turn, finding that unconventional family gave our main character a purpose. He didn't have a purpose prior to meeting these three,
Mhm.
because him and Kumatetsu had struggled with finding the purpose in life. Kumatetsu's purpose became protecting and teaching, Kyuta, right?
Mhm.
So he went from having no purpose and being this, aloof, devil may care, laissez faire attitude guy, to now really caring about this human kid that just popped into his life randomly one day.
And he's doing the
And
best he can. Like this,
yeah,
like you know what's interesting? He's like providing Ren with stability. The kid has a
yes,
roof over his head. He has plenty of eggs. He is, looked after. Doesn't matter. Like Kumatetsu is going to wake up in the morning and be there. Like
yeah,
Ren or Kyuta, his dad. His parents divorced, and then his dad lost custody, so he can't really see his dad as much. And then his mom passes away. Like, this is a kid who hasn't had stability,
a
and
stable family
yeah,
life, right? He's technically, like I say, he's basically an orphan, and everything he's experienced in his life up until this point has been dark,
yeah,
right? So that's why he has that inherent darkness in him. But by meeting Kumatetsu, he starts to bring this light into his life that allows him to go back into the human world with a little bit more trust of the human world, and not so much, anger. Even though he still has that anger, it's just he's controlling it a lot more. And
when
kind
you
of just the I think that's the thing that made me kind of well up, is the Kumatetsu's part in the story of him like really learning to just love, and love somebody other than himself,
mhm. Well,
because that's not something you really see a lot of times in male characters or male depicted characters, in animation or animated kind of films. This thing where the character throughout the course of the movie goes from not really caring about himself in a sense to really loving himself enough to care about something other than himself, to be able to then sacrifice himself.
ugh. And
Ah, my
right.
goodness,
He's
Mark.
but like, here's the thing though. You're right. This character is so rare. This is a rare character. And like, the movie, there's been movies before where kind of gruff men learn to love, but
Yeah,
not done in this way. Like, not tackled like this. It's more,
not at all.
and like, these men are just gruff because I don't know, they're just gruff. Like, oh, I'm just a gruff cop. Oh, I gotta watch this kid. Oh, I'm loving now. But
Yeah, yeah.
Kawatetsu, like, what's interesting is he grew up on his own. He taught one of the most interesting things about this movie is he taught himself. And so he has a funky style. He
Yeah,
taught so like if you're it's interesting, I think with a lot of kids, right, who grow up on their own or kids don't have a lot of boundaries or they have a lot of freedom because they don't have adults in their lives, it becomes very hard for them to take instructions because when you have freedom when you get home, when you have other stresses when you get home, you don't want to go deal with like a master who doesn't try to understand you and just tells you things. Like you don't want
yeah,
that. So he became his own literal beast. And and I think that once you start becoming that, he started believing it. And then everyone believed that about him. And
exactly.
and so, I think everyone always saw the potential in him, but he saw himself as a loner, as a who didn't want that. Like maybe he didn't want to try because he didn't want to fail and put that hurt on himself. And maybe that's
Exactly.
why he chased kids away because then he didn't have to fail. Like he just chased them away so he didn't have a chance to succeed or fail. And that's why, like Ren was great because he's a stubborn little punk. And I think he probably stays out of spite. Just like, I'm not leaving this guy. I'm gonna defeat this guy. And then the two form a bond. And then they fight the darkness in him. And also too, like I see these beasts as what humans have. Like there is a beast inside of humans. And you don't have to let that inner beast explode, right? You don't have to become a monster. Like there are ways to deal with your anger. There are ways to be a beast and not use telekinesis or whatever one of those to take a sword and kill somebody. But I find the parallels between, he did this with wolf children too, but like the parallel of, you live with these beasts who are quite passive, and then you have it's like what Guillermo del Toro does, right? Like the monsters are the good guys and humans are the bad guys.
Yeah,
He uses the real monsters are humans. But I think it's interesting that in this world, like you can have a temper, you can be beast like, but that doesn't mean you're a bad person. It just means you got to like understand what's inside you. And I think that's the problem with Ichiro Iko, where he's never able to explore or find an identity. There's always just this weight of uncertainty and
because of
self-consciousness. And
his family and the family that he's connected to,
yeah,
you know?
yeah, and like that builds, man. That builds and builds and builds, and the kid's never able to express who they are. And then it just pays off with some horrifying whale attacks, which Moby Dick is in this, and that's all about like the pursuit of meaning and like nature being uncontrollable
And
and
but see,
obsession.
this is what I love about anime though, is it's just levels and layers of story within story within story. Because again, once Kyuta shows up and he encounters Kyuta, and then he sees how his brother reacts to Kyuta's presence. And he initially they try to beat him up, and well, they did beat him up initially
Mhm.
until he got strong enough to defend himself, right? And that really set him off. He didn't like that. And that's what created that was like the jump off point of his darkness really starting to brew and starting to, because he knew in his heart that he wasn't of the beast people, and this kid who isn't of the beast people is just being accepted while he's walking around with this, fake hat, and he's asking, when are my horns going to grow, when am I going to
Mhm.
start looking like you, dad? And
Soon,
it's,
soon.
soon you're going to look like me, sure enough, and he knows he's being lied to, but he's just going with the flow, and it, Cuta's presence, or Ren. We keep saying, like, I love cute. I love the name Cuta, but
I guess his name is Ren, but then he
his
gets
name,
named Kyuta,
because
which is
Kumatetsu
9.
gave him. Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, as their relationship starts to grow, that training montage is probably hands down one of my
Oh
favorite
man.
training montages
The
ever.
watermelon punching.
Oh my goodness! Or and the sneak training where he's sneaky watching him, and then
Yeah.
he's copying his moves, and
Knows all his footsteps.
it's just, there's so many elements to this movie that really shows off what the director, his genius, right?
Mhm.
His level of kind of thought into just the themes on the story, how those themes develop the characters, and how those character arcs within that, hour and, what was it, 45-minute movie.
Yeah. No,
um
it's about 2 hours.
Yeah, it's about 2 hours, an hour and 56 minutes, with credits. All the characters, pretty much, all the characters that we're introduced to in the movie, all experience character arcs, all, learn some type of lesson or some type of meaning through the life and through the world that they're living in. They We get to see the balance and harmony of the light and dark, come to I guess a head, at some point, at several points in the movie, but mainly, of course, at the the climax of the movie. These themes, again, that the way he uses themes, not saying that he's created themes,
Yeah.
but the way he uses them in the movie, I just think he does them in a way that, as you said, in his other movies, and if a lot of people didn't know, this is the man that directed a lot of your favorite Digimon episodes and movies. So if you're of a certain age, you grew up, and I was one of those kids. I wasn't really big into Pokemon when Pokemon first came out. I was more of a Digimon kid. So I really did prefer Digimon for whatever reason. I think it was the multiple evolutions into like these crazy Megazord looking things, but it's just one of my favorite movies because of how he layers those themes and how you see the progression of these characters grow throughout the movie, even before you get to the final battle, which is a big thing in a lot of movies. It's like you don't see the arc until the final battle. You get to see these arcs before the final battle. We get to see a lot of that, happening throughout the movie over the course of the movie with through the training montage, the
Hmm.
sumo wrestling scene where
Oh
where
yeah.
Kyuta first really gets to see Kumatetsu for who he is, and like you said, they're both, he's stubborn. Kumatetsu is like just brash and just direct.
Gets his teeth
He's not a
punched out of his
bad guy.
face during one
Yeah,
scene.
he's not a bad guy. He's just direct and he's brash, and he, like you said, he went around so long, walking around, with this idea of himself that he didn't really see until Kyuta brought it into his life. So that's one of my favorite aspects of the movie. And that's the thing, one of the main things that makes me tear up every time I watch the movie. The several times I've watched it, I always bust a tear out or two. I can't lie.
And I guess between this and Wolf Children, they tackle identity and raising kids and how you allow these kids to become adults in such a really unique way. And I was trying to explain The Boy and the Beast to my wife Megan. She's like, "That sounds really good." Like I just explained the themes, and I just I can't speak for other people. I mean, this movie was grossed a lot of money. It won the best animated film in Japan. And what's interesting? I was reading one of his interviews, and he said it seems like Japanese people aren't interested in the topic of identity at all. Hisoda said this, and he goes, "It's such an important topic to people in other countries, right? That's one thing that makes Japan interesting." But what's interesting is that this movie made bank in Japan, and it really does tackle identity. Uh, Now, I have a question. Like, there's like the stoic protagonist in a lot of animation, and anime has a lot of stoic protagonists. Is this kind of a different type of story than most anime in Japan?
I wouldn't say a diff. I mean, yes and no. In the sense of course, you have your archetype characters. That stoic character is a very you're going to see a stoic character in pretty much any anime. It can be a slice of life anime is going to have a stoic character in that thing. But the stoic character, it's kind of like akin to having a good revenge movie, character, like a John Wick, you
Yeah.
know,
Oh, okay.
or Equalizer. It's the stoic character is like just a necessary trope in most
Hmm.
anime, I feel like, at this point. And I think the main difference between our stoic characters in this movie, versus your typical stoic characters in, say, like a Cowboy Bebop or a Berserk. Berserk is heavy, right? Berserk. I don't know if you're familiar with the anime slash manga slash Netflix. Once upon a time Berserk, but Berserk is a dark, dark fantasy anime about this hardened friggin', dude walking around with a giant sword chopping people in half, and he's a man of very few words, and he gets the job done, right? And
Mm.
that's what most stoic characters are, essentially a dude with very few words and a little bit of a swagger to him that everybody is just like, who is this guy? Everybody's so interested about this stoic character. So, or they're known, for something, and that's what we see in this movie, right? Our main character Kumatetsu, essentially, he's this stoic character who's known in his world for just being different than everybody else.
Yeah, yeah,
You know, he's not stop cat. Hold on. He goes out of his way to be outside of the box, right? In his
yeah.
world. He wants to do his own thing. And that's something that, as I said, you'll see that in many animes. But the difference is with this character is, again, like I said earlier, he grows in such a way, like Guts doesn't grow like this, in Berserk the same way as Komatetsu grows in this movie. We get to see, like I say, a character who goes from really not caring about much and really just himself to caring about something other than himself enough to give his life for someone else. But essentially is still there with them, in spirit,
Yeah,
in
it's a
soul.
sword and a soul.
A sword and a soul. But for Cowboy Bebop is another example of a stoic character. Cowboy Bebop is a classic. Spike Spiegel, he's this bounty hunter. Laid back, really heavy swagger. Like we talking swagger on swag on swag on swag. So he is very indifferent, doesn't show much vulnerability, throughout the series. He shows a bit of it, but you don't really get to see the heart of Spike Spiegel, so to say, and that's one of the biggest differences, again, that we see with movies like this. The character is very much um open, or he gets to the point where he's open to learning and growing and being more than just who he is with some of his parts that everybody expects him to be,
And there's so few of these characters, right?
Yeah,
Like
yeah. I mean, in anime as a whole. Now,
in
granted,
general
anime
though, but like
is
us
such.
growing up, right? We didn't have any like like listen, like I know Mad Max and like the Man with No Name from the Man with No Name trilogy, they're all silent assassins, out for revenge or just quiet. But like growing up, I feel like we didn't have that's why I feel like I kind of like Jean-Claude Van Damme because he had more of a sensitive side to him,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
Like and
yeah,
he got beat up. And
I
so
think back, because the '90s and the '80s was such a hard era, right? You grew up
yeah,
in the '80s and '90s, you were hard,
yeah, you
right?
did not show
Especially if
emotion, right? Like
i-
no,
if you
yeah.
were, that's the latchkey kid era. You grew up as a latchkey kid during that time for the most part, because either you grew up with one parent who worked and you were just doing your thing, out here in these streets, as it were, growing up and learning to move about life a certain way. But
Mhm.
that, I think that was a big thing in the '90s. Action movies, the '80s specifically. With the action movie, the action trope, the action guy trope, right?
Mhm.
Um, and even with the anime of that time, right? Anime movies of that time, Akira is the
Oh
first one that
gosh, yeah.
pops in my head, right? Post-apocalyptic, um, a lot of the themes of those movies were based off of kind of the remnants of World War II, right? The bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and a lot of the anime reflects that of that time. A lot of these post-apocalyptic, Fist of the North Star, and you know those themes were about another stoic character, Fist of the
Yeah.
North Star. Guy didn't say much, but if he touched you with his finger, your face was going to explode open, right? And to kind of flip it on its head with Kumatetsu's character being this stoic character who has a big ass heart, who never really knew. I mean, I don't even know if he knew he had a heart that big. I just think once Kyuta slash Ren was brought into his life, and him and his friend's life, I think he began to see what it could be like to open his heart to others. in a way
Mhm.
that he couldn't do before. So these themes of stoic characters we generally see in most anime. And again, like anime is so huge, people. Let's like we cannot just bundle it all into this one film
Yeah,
by
exactly.
any
It's like
means of it.
yeah. Yeah.
There's so many different genres and so many different, types of anime and manga. So this specific type of manga style slash movie, you're really getting a different um approach to the character. Ghost in the Shell is another
Mhm.
example of a classic movie, anime movie with the character who, for all intents and purposes, she has really no. I don't know, she doesn't have a soul. She has a soul, but she doesn't have really emotion throughout the movie until she gets to the point where she realizes that she's the ghost in the shell, and then she starts to have this. The things start to trickle a little bit, and she starts to grow a little bit. But again, it's very very much dialed in. Whereas Kumatetsu, he gets to a point where his heart is so big, he just can't contain it anymore.
Ah. Yeah.
And I just love the fact that the relationship between Kyuta and Kumatetsu, they form this bond, not just as master and student, but it's kind of like his father and son. And I think that was a big point for me too. All love that good father son bonding kind of thing that again we didn't really see much growing up, at all. Really, I mean,
Like
what was the one movie with
like
Ed
Bronx
O'Neill,
Tale, right? Bronx Tale punched
Bronx
me in the face,
Tale?
right?
That's there. There's
I
a
know that's not
few,
an
right?
animated film, but like I remember watching that like two kind of different influences in his life, De Niro and Palminteri, and like just like watching that, like the cinema, it's very rare. I'm telling, like
It's
it's
very rare. It's
yeah,
not it's
and
not a main sticking point or selling point to a lot of movies to have, the main male lead character be highlighted as a full human being, not just, a hard ass tough guy, right?
and,
So
and I want to apologize too for being like, hey, is this like all of anime, a decade spanning thing with thousands of millions of hours of entertainment? I guess just looking into kind of like having just watched The Boy and the Heron and then watching this, I guess you do have the stoic lead character in The Boy and the Heron, which I love, and then you have this. So it was kind of just interesting watching these two back to back. And
it's the juxtaposition of how they choose to play that character, right? That
mhm.
stoic role, and I think that's what the director does very well with this movie, is how he's making the main character a full-fledged character and not just one dimensional. I mean, not for nothing, we all love John Wick, but John Wick's a very kind of one-dimensional
Kill,
character,
kill, 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 kill.
and it's his trope is the same trope that every character like that has in these type of movies. Someone, generally a woman, is killed, and once the woman is killed, it gives him the drive, the motivation to get back in them streets and seek revenge for the one he loves. And look, we all love a great revenge, movie. I love a good revenge, movie slash show. Side note, K dramas do the damn best with those damn things. Like a Korean drama will make a hell of a revenge story for that ass, right? But I think one of the best um parts of kind of this movie, and it wasn't technically a revenge story, right? I think it was more so a resentment story, because that was another theme, that we see throughout the movie is the resentment that Kyuta, has in the beginning of the movie of the human world, because he's been let down so much, right?
Mhm.
He's been let down. He's become resentful. He become, untrusting of people. Until this one day he just happens to see these two weird animal guys walking across his path, and that changes his life. Now, and on the flip, our antagonist, he, has this resentment because he knows he's being lied to. He's been lied to his whole life, and this he chooses. I guess to blindly accept it because he still has this hope that, oh, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, it's going to happen, right? And then when he meets Kyuta and he realizes Kyuta's like, oh shit, you're a human too, essentially, right? Like he realizes, oh, this isn't going to
Yep.
happen, and that resentment grows so great in him that it eventually creates Moby Dick and friggin' psionic form of just kaiju destructive friggin' massive. Oh,
It's so good.
that's that that scene when that just the cinematography of that scene of the
Oh, it's
whale
beautiful, right? And then
jumping,
the
it's
horror-esque
so
shots too of the kid
friggin'
just walking on the video cameras. Like there's the kid's just walking and it's very horror-esque, like on the
yeah,
video.
yeah.
Sorry to interrupt, but like, yeah, the shots, it's gorgeous, man. And I love sea
No, no,
creatures, so
not
this
at
was
all. And
great.
I don't mind
Yeah,
you interrupt me whenever you
yeah.
want to. All right, okay.
But you know what I like too is the lead characters is I have seen these characters before, but they're complete caricatures. Each and every single one of these characters, I understand them though. Like I really do. Like Ren, I understand why Ren is angry. Ren's not just like a one-dimensional brat. And then you have, oh gosh, I have his name. Sorry. I just don't want to miss Kamatetsu. Like he you understand why he is who he is. And I just, and like Eosin, like I don't think he's a bad guy. I just think he's a very driven, train heavy father who I think loves his kids, but also is trying to protect his kid, but did the wrong thing because he probably is not that much. He's not too communicative, and like, it's just interesting that sometimes you watch these movies and you're like, this kid's a brat. um, barring in mind that they're children, but I don't know. Ren, I always understood. Does that make sense? Like
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
No, I think to again, one of the I guess the biggest plot points of the movie is the conformity aspect of it too. The conformity of going through this, match to determine who's going to be the next god of gods. So I think that weighed heavily on him trying to raise his sons, but at the same time conforming to the expectations of what everybody expects is going to happen. It's either going to be him or Kumatetsu, and doing so is not the bestest father,
yeah. Mhm.
right? And that's another thing we get to see how the one character who is the golden boy, the man of the hour, he's depicted as the and he's him, as the kids say, right? That's what the kids say. He's him, right? And then you
Mhm.
see Kumatetsu, the flip of him. No kids, rebel, stoic loner, ends up becoming a better father than the guy who grew up with kids, or not grew up with kids,
Yeah,
but
yeah,
who
raised
who
kids.
raised two children, because he was more concerned with the conformity and fitting this role and meeting this expectation of the people versus the expectation of his and being honest with his adopted son, essentially, and if he would have been honest with his adoptive son, that darkness would have never had an opportunity to grow. And I think that's a credit to the director again, man. Like just the way he weaves these themes throughout the movie. And it's just, when I message you about just themes on themes on themes, that's kind of the I keep saying dub. It's one of my favorite aspects of the movie is just how the themes are so interwoven and how we see the growth and the development of all the characters, like you said, um, throughout the movie because we see each character as a full-fledged character. We get to see all of them and we see the conclusion of what happens to them at the end of the movie. And
Yeah.
he's just man, he did the damn thing with this movie, man. And just the art direction, the cinematography, the
Yeah, gorgeous. The
animation
wide
is just
shots.
so they're so gorgeous. The downtown shots, they're just so gorgeously done. And man, it's just a testament to why I have such a a space in my heart for anime, because of when I look at Western animation styles, with the exception of Disney, you can exclude Disney because Disney has always kind of pushed the boundaries of what they've done with animation throughout time, essentially throughout its history. And when you look at all the other animation studios that have come about, after Disney that have tried to do similar things, there have been hits and there have been misses, DreamWorks and Pixar, which are now the same company. If I'm
I'm
not.
gonna real quick. I watched How to Train Your Dragon 2 the other day.
Oh, I
Those
love that
movies are
movie.
stunningly beautiful, but they go hard.
Yeah,
Like people die.
yeah,
Like dragons die, parents die. Like it's a I mean, they're stunningly beautiful, and I think they should have won an Oscar. And
and
I
and
love like, oh man, it's crazy.
that's a kind of a again, I think that's an influence that anime has had on Western animation because we haven't really seen that in Western animation up until like I would say the late 2010s, maybe, where you start to see these movie studios making movies a little edgier, a little darker. I mean, even Toy Story 3 had a point in the movie where you're like, oh
They're all
no,
gonna
are the
die.
toys gonna die? You're in a moment of suspense. So I think they're realizing that it's okay to push the boundaries with animation. Kids are kids and they're not going to, it's not going to take anything away from them enjoying what they're watching, just because it hits on a little bit of a heavier note. And I think with a lot of the um, earlier animated animation studios, um, what was the studio that did the biblical animated movie? I can't think of the name right now. It's losing me.
Are you talking about DreamWorks, the biblical one?
DreamWorks, yeah, the
They did Prince of Egypt.
Prince of Egypt, yeah.
Yeah,
So like when that came out, that was a
beautiful
beautifully
looking movie. Yeah,
animated movie. I love that movie actually.
looks great.
It looks amazing, but again, the you didn't have that many studios making that quality type of animation back then. And with anime, you have so many different studios making high quality
Yeah,
animation, stories, visuals for the last, well, in my lifetime, since I started watching anime in the what 90s, is when I really got, well, honestly, it was the 80s if I'm being real, because the Voltron and the Speed Racer, that used to come
yeah.
on regular TV back in the day. So that was essentially probably my first introduction to anime back then, was those, early television animated series.
You know
But
what's
when I
crazy?
really,
Oh, sorry. Go for it. Sorry.
oh, I'm sorry. But I was gonna say when I really got heavy into like what learning what anime had to offer was probably the 90s.
Got it. Like, you know what I love about DreamWorks animation is that they actually ended up having to like scale everything back. It got too expensive. Their movies, like they went so hard trying to make beautiful films that they had to scale back and they had to like lose most of their staff, which is kind of
Yeah,
crazy. So like they really pushed animation, but then they couldn't sustain it. But
yeah,
but I think there's like I think they just went overboard, but also they were new and trying to battle Pixar. I think, a lot of companies over in Japan, that's just part of the culture, right? Like they aren't like they obviously want to make money, they want to get market share, but it seems
yeah.
more
I think
about
it there
the
that is a big difference too over in terms of the studios in Japan, whereas anime is and manga, essentially, I want to say they're the same thing, but they're derivative of one another. One essentially exists with the other, and one can't exist without the other, right? So, um, anime is just such a culturally kind of significant thing, right? So, when you think from a Western standpoint of animation, right, we think of it as just kid stuff for well, not
for
so
the
much anymore, but the average, person back
yeah.
in the day, you would have asked, what do you
Remember
think about
Simpsons when it came out?
cartoons?
Like remember Simpsons? Everyone's like, oh, it's kid stuff, and everyone's like, oh, wait. You can be
But
funny.
technically, it wasn't kid stuff because it came on with the Tracy Ullman show. I used to
Yeah.
watch the Tracy Ullman show back in the day, and I remember they were little shorts. So, technically, The Simpsons was never really a kid's show. And I think
No, but I think
that's
people thought that. You know what I mean?
that's
Like,
what people thought in our culture, in Western cultures, that for the most part, they view cartoons as for kids.
and then we
Whereas,
get Up, and then we had, like, Wall-E,
yeah, and
but those are the 10,
again,
like,
I
yeah.
think that's the Pixar. Like, if we're being honest, Pixar, DreamWorks films that have released in the last 20 years have taken a lot of influences heavily from a lot of anime films and movies. Um, because
Mhm.
like I said, you see the intensity being brought to these movies that weren't there in the 90s and the early 2000s. The DreamWorks movies weren't dark. Kung Fu
Shrek.
Panda.
Yeah.
I love Kung Fu Panda. Kung Fu Panda is one of my favorite movies. One of my favorite DreamWorks animated films. I can't wait to see Kung Fu Panda 4, right?
Yeah.
Kung Fu Panda is one of those rare movies that kind of like A Boy and the Beast, right? It You get a chance. The first two movies were so amazing, and you get to see the continued development of the main character's arc, right? We see Kung Fu Panda continue to become a better kung fu guy, right? Essentially, and we continue to see him get better with communicating with his team and growing just as a overall person,
And
right?
his adopted father.
And his adopted father, right? And when he realizes he's adopted. Um, but I think we're seeing this kind of influx of these kind of heavier themes within our uh, animated features because of the influence that anime has had on a lot of our um, animated movies. And look at Avatar. Avatar is a prime example of the influence that they were willing to take a Nickelodeon show and make that thing a damn masterpiece of just character, story, you know, um, world building. Man, just that's what makes people love that series so much, the Avatar series, right? They were willing to make an episodic series with heavy themes that tackled, heavy heavy subject matter, without outright saying it so much so in certain instances, like the whole Zuko's mother thing. Like, did he kill his mother? Like, what happened to the mother? Like, what did his dad do to the mother? So I think anime has really affected what we are watching now and our animation in the Western cultures. And I'm here for it. So I don't hate it at all. I love it.
And listen, I think kids need movies like The Boy and the Beast. I think they need, like, I think, remember, I watched Nightmare Before Christmas when I was younger. I watched, I feel like there were some pretty heavy, like Old Yeller. I watched some pretty heavy G-rated PG movies growing up, but it kind of taught me about loss. It taught me about responsibility. It taught me about, like, accepting yourself.
Pull
Like,
yourself up by the bootstraps.
right? Like, you watch this movie and you see this kid using his anger and learning and growing and becoming a better person. And I think when you push kids, they really do respond to it. I think a lot of people want to put, like, really basic stuff in front of them. And sure, it sells. But I think children, or even adults, shoot, I love this movie. I think adults want to have that. Like, I think when you deal with stuff like this, when you make kids reach into their emotions and feel, like when you watch Up, like the beginning of Up, when you watch Wally and you have to think about this culture and what they've become. Like, I think that's important. Like, I think kids need to watch Cars because it's fun, but I also think just dealing with loss and anger and your temper is important as well. And this is really random, but I was looking through some like classic action films. No, if you think of, like, some of the moments that have really stuck out with me, Or like in Saving Private Ryan when he talks about his mom trying to wake him up, but he was pretending to be asleep. He's like, I don't know why I did that. And like recently, I love Furiosa, who is an absolute badass, but she carries the weight on her, like just and like and like Aliens, Ripley and Newt. Like I love the different characters in that. Even Unforgiven was like an anti-action film that really stuck with me. So I think like Die Hard. Remember how popular John McClane was just because he was a regular guy and not like a Terminator? And
Yeah,
like,
not like a superhero like dude
yeah, and like he
running
expressed,
around with yeah.
he becomes best friends with what Al Powell. They like hug each other at the end. Like they become best friends. So I think the world really does respond to messages like this. Like I think when you make a character something different, people really like look at James Dean in the 50s, right? Like James Dean shook a lot, like The Graduate in 67.
Mhm.
I think sometimes you need characters who aren't what you're used
Well, I
to make
think
people
that's a
feel
testament
something.
to I don't even know how to put it, but because again, like I said, in Japan, anime is just a thing. Anime is to Japan as TV is to America, right? So they're willing to tackle subjects in their animation that we don't really tackle, you know, typically in our animation, right? So
Mhm.
you, they're exposed to it at a young age, right? And they're exposed to these same themes that you would see in live action series, just in animated form. And I think that's where the disconnect comes for a lot of people. You know, with this movie in particular, the themes that are tackled in this movie are, yes, they're heavy, but the payoff, is worth it because again, we get to see the growth of the characters. We get to see Kyuta, get his love of his life throughout at he
Yeah.
gets the love of his life after finding the father that he never had, had essentially, and seeing them grow through their communication, seeing how Kade how he came to her aid and then she came to his aid and then they both grew to love each other through their adversities that they were dealing with. And that's the type of stuff that we all experience in life, and I think that's why the movie resonated so well with so many people, and that's why it did so well, is because of the again, it's the themes that the director tackles and the way he puts them into this movie, and how we see the growth of all of the characters. Like that's I think that's the best payoff to when a whether it's a movie or a series, is the best payoff is to see all the characters that you're introduced to have that full circle moment. There's nothing worse than watching something and the character stays this one dimensional character the whole time, or the main character has this growth development or his growth arc, and then all the characters around him remain the
Don't.
same.
They're only there for that one character's growth,
Yes, I
right? Like
hate
I
that.
hate that.
It is the
It's
worst.
it's so
And
self-centered. And it's like I only exist to make you a better man. Like,
it's like the
no.
reason the Flash TV show ended up sucking so bad, right? It's the reason the Arrow show ended up those WB DC shows, which I loved. I can't front. I loved those shows in the beginning, but it got to the point where it's like, okay, we're seeing the main characters develop, but everybody else is just there to help him grow as a person. The best payoff comes when all the characters we are introduced to have some point in time throughout this series or this movie where they grow into a full-fledged person, right? That's why we all connected with the Avatar series. That's why we all connected with the Boy and the Beast. All of us in this, little niche section of anime who love anime connected with this series or with this movie. All the characters have that payoff. We get the benefit of seeing that payoff, and it makes you just feel so oh so good in the heart,
Yeah.
like when we see it. And the
I
visual aspects of it on top of it, just hits another note and another level, man.
I have a great quote from Hosoda talking about this movie. He wrote, I find the concept of personal change to be a particularly interesting one that should certainly be included in films. The most straightforward way of expressing change is through showing the maturation of children. In order to illustrate their growth, we need to show the families of the children with them. Many people tell me that's the reason why families are naturally included in my films. What I really want to capture are the moments that cause people to change, and also why people evolve into something that differs from who they used to be. Those thoughts are always in my mind when I work. I often say that people don't
Uh,
change easily, and people can't just cheer up even if you
I
tell
just
them
got
to.
chills.
Yeah, he's like, to me, the key is understanding what does cheer us up and what allows us to be truly who we are. I'm very interested in finding those triggers to change. And I think all of this is very relevant to the topic of identity.
Uh, and that's literally the synopsis of The Boy and His Beast.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it's literally just he does it so well, man. He just he hits the mark every time with what he just said, and that quote was essentially what he did with this movie. And that's the best, again, it's the best payoff as a viewer. That's what I want as a viewer. I do not want to be edged, so to say, and then like with no release of like my emotions. I need my emotions to come full circle. I need to see the characters grow. And I think that's why I connect with the anime so much, is because I get that payoff a lot in a lot of the anime that I've watched and I've been able to watch and fortunate to enjoy, you know.
uh, yeah, I love it. This opened up a different world to me. Watched some really cool movies. Listen, I'm still the novice of all novices, but you got to start somewhere and you got to
Welcome
learn
to
and
the
you got to
world,
explore it.
man. You
Yeah.
got look, and that's the best part of anime. Oh, there's a comedian on TikTok. His name is Kev on Stage. He's hilarious, and he's been documenting his foray into anime, right? So he has been taking suggestions from people in the comments, and he's been watching anime, and it's hilarious. It's been hilarious to watch. Um, but the first couple that he started with were like really serious, heavy anime. He started with like Attack on Titan and Full Metal Alchemist Brotherhood. So I would say, if you want to start off light, look at some slice of lives. Start off with the slice of life anime before you get into the really heavy stuff. But it's a great genre to really get into for those of you out there who haven't really gotten into anime or really taken the time to watch any anime. Do yourself a favor, get out there, look up some, and all it really is just if you like action movies, look up action anime. If you love drama, look up drama anime. It's so easy. You're gonna find something you're gonna love. There's so much out there, so don't sleep on the anime out there, people. Don't
Yeah.
sleep on it. It's so funny. Because I've come of an era of anime of like typical teenage kid, I wanted to see the blood, the guts, the gore, all that, right? It wasn't until I got older I started delving into the more dramatic and the more abstract, Perfect Blue. Like Perfect Blue wasn't on my radar in '97. Although, Ninja Scrolls was.
Ninja Scroll.
Um
Yeah. Yeah.
and Ninja Scrolls had a lot of blood and action and guts and gore, right? So that's again one of another favorite aspect of anime for me is just you're always going to find something. Like no matter how old it can be 10, 20 years old and it'll be new to you, right? And
Hmm.
it'll be the first time you watched it and then you're just stuck. You're like, "Oh, I need more. I need more of this anime stuff, man. I want that purple drink." You going to want you know you're going to want to find more stuff to really check out and really delve into. um and that's why again I chose this movie for a reason, because I feel like it get the payoff, right?
Yeah.
It gives you that dopamine hit to say, "Well, I want to see what else is out there like this." And is it episodic? Can I watch something like this in episode form? And yes, you can. And it's called Demon Slayer. So um that's another great series. Um, they actually just released a movie, what,
Yeah. It
two
just came
weeks
out.
ago?
Did it not?
It just came out like I want to say
Yeah.
a week ago. I wanted to see it, but I had to work. I couldn't see it. Damn it,
That'll work.
damn work. But Demon Slayer is just another one of my favorite newer animes. I've been following it since it came out. Um, and again, there's so much out there, people. There's so much. So check it out. Don't sleep on it.
And you know what's interesting is I feel like a lot of my favorite movies, like Bottle Rocket, Royal Tenenbaums, Take Shelter. I love this film, and like I know it's a completely different country, different genre, different rating, but like Train to Busan, it's about a guy trying to save his daughter and a guy trying to save his wife, and just like what the sacrifices they make for their kids and becoming like better in the process of being chased by zombies. Like those are the movies that connect with me. They really
Exactly.
do. I know there's other films that work, but I don't know. I love the idea of connection and family, and ever since I had a daughter, this movie hits differently too. Just thinking about being a parent, and so yeah, like Wolf Children. Geez Louise.
I think that's the best thing to watch in this movie is his growth as a parent. Kumatetsu's growth as a parent, a reluctant parent nonetheless, but a, a parent, in the end
He's
to
there.
Kyuta. He's there for him every step of the way. And I love like the initial passive aggressive kind of, tug of war they have with each other in the beginning. And when the scene where they're eating and he's like he puts the eggs in the rice and he spins it up and he's like, what the hell is that? He's like, you want me to eat that? And he's like, you don't have to eat it if you don't want to. And then he got mad. So he said, I'm going to eat it just to prove that I can eat it, even though I think it's disgusting. So I just love seeing that and my visuals, man. I want to see that little, that we see them, fighting each other, but we see the love initially. You could see it. You could see it from the jump. Like, oh, okay, there, he already is kind of taking to the kid and the kid is kind of taking to him, but they're both the same person. So they're both going to be stubborn and they're both going to, fight each other every step of the way and really try to one up each other. And in the end, they end up, that scene where
Yeah.
he gives himself up, man, and he
Selling
turns
his
and he
soul.
puts the soul. Oh, that's the part that brings the tear to my eye because it's that full circle moment for Fukuta, right? Because in that opening scene, we see him in the alley and he's alone and he's crying and it's raining and he's,
I
having
hate
these
you. I hate you.
flashbacks. Yeah, oh my God. And it tugs at you so bad, right? And
Hate is so powerful, man, and he learns to just not hate.
yeah, and you see his growth of accepting love and being accepting of love and being accepting of being loved, right? That's those we don't see themes like that in our cartoons in the West. I'm sorry, we just don't. Like with again, like I'm not the
Listen, there are
connoisseur.
exceptions, but
There's
they're
exceptions to the rule.
but it's still 90-10.
Yeah, it's not something we see that often, right, in our media. So, um, the fact that there is a lot of that out there in the anime world is one of the reasons I always try to get people into the anime, especially like my friends that I know aren't in the anime. I'll sneak references in, in conversation. They're like, "Oh yeah, Naruto," and try to get them to just, give it a shot. Don't sleep on it.
This is great. I I love it. I love this episode. You brought it this week.
Oh, I'm down. I'm down. I'm always down, Mark. Thank you
Uh,
again. I always enjoy this. I enjoy talking anime anytime. So,
I love
anytime
it.
you want to talk more anime, man, let me know. Thank you for having me.
We're gonna do it. So for me, Mark Hoffmeyer, and for Kai, this is Movies, Souls, and Flicks. We'll see you next week.
Peace.